You dare slap her? The shout cracked through the marble corridor like thunder. On the gleaming floor, Mrs. Eleanor Duval, 72 and fragile as fine china, pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. A red mark bloomed against pale skin, fresh, violent, humiliating. Hovering above her was Savannah Duval, diamond bangles glittering as she trembled with fury. You've ruled this family long enough, Eleanor, she hissed. You don't get to decide who deserves his fortune. Savannah's voice sliced through the air, sharp as the stiletto heels that tapped against the marble. You think you can keep pretending you're still his wife? You're just a name on a document. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Thank you for being part of this family from the beginning. Before we continue, kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share. God bless you. From the doorway, Amara Blake, the family's black maid, froze. The tray in her hands rattled. Miss Savannah, please, she's your stepmother. Don't do this, she said, her tone trembling but firm. Savannah's gaze snapped toward her. Stay out of it, she spat, striking the tray from Amara's grip. Silver and porcelain clattered across the floor, a sound too loud, too final. Before Amara could move, the oak doors flew open. Adrian Duval, tall, composed, the heir to everything glittering in that house, stood frozen in disbelief. His eyes took in the scene, his mother's trembling frame, his stepsister's tear-streaked act, the maid standing between them. Adrian! Savannah gasped, clutching her wrist as though in pain. She attacked Mother. She went crazy. I tried to stop her. That's not true, Amara said quickly, stepping forward. Enough. Adrian's voice was ice. You don't speak to my family like that. The silence that followed hurt more than any slap could. Mrs. Duval reached weakly for her son. Adrian, listen. He turned away. Savannah, take her upstairs. Now. Savannah's smirk was small, but victorious. As Amara bent to collect the fallen tray, Savannah brushed past her and whispered, You'll be gone before dawn. She was right. That night, Amara's dismissal arrived, her name inked in Adrian's hand. Outside, rain spilled down the mansion's stone steps. Amara stood beneath the awning, her suitcase heavy, her heart heavier. Behind her, the Duval estate glowed with cold light, a palace built on lies and silence. She had done the right thing, and it had cost her everything. Still, as thunder rolled, she whispered to herself, I'd do it again. Outside, rain spilled down the mansion's stone steps. Amara stood beneath the awning, her suitcase heavy, her heart heavier. Behind her, the Duval estate glowed with cold light, a palace built on lies and silence. She had done the right thing, and it had cost her everything. Still, as thunder rolled, she whispered to herself, I'd do it again. The driver didn't meet her eyes when he handed over the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, formal, impersonal, final. Termination of employment. Signed * Adrian Duval. Amara's fingers tightened around the page until it wrinkled. The signature bled slightly where the ink hadn't dried. It looked rushed, as if he hadn't wanted to think about it too long. From the second-floor balcony, Savannah watched her go. A faint smile played on her painted lips as she leaned against the marble rail. Erase her, she murmured to herself. Every trace. She had already called the agency. By morning, Amara Blake's record would show breach of trust. No family in Atlanta's upper circles would touch her again. Inside, in his study, Adrian Duval stood with a pen still trembling between his fingers. Rain streaked the tall windows behind him. His reflection stared back, tired, uncertain, angry at things he couldn't name. Sir, said the butler softly, Mrs. Duval is asking for you. Adrian closed the folder. Tell her she needs rest. He didn't go. He couldn't. He told himself he'd done the right thing, protected his mother from further chaos. Still, something about the way the maid had looked at him before leaving, eyes steady, no excuses, unsettled him. For a moment, he almost went after her. Then Savannah entered, damp from the balcony but radiant, her performance seamless. It's over, she whispered, wrapping her arms around his arm. You did what you had to do. He nodded numbly. For Mother. Savannah smiled. Of course. For Mother. Outside, Amara trudged toward the main gate, shoes sinking into the mud. The mansion's lights blurred in the rain, turning gold to gray. Her breath came out in uneven clouds, half sob, half strength. By the time she reached the gate, the security guard handed her a folded umbrella, pity in his eyes. "Take it, Miss Blake," he said. "You don't deserve this." She managed a small nod. No one ever does. As she walked down the long driveway, the thunder softened. Every step carried her further from the world she'd served, and deeper into one she'd have to rebuild. Her mind drifted backward, years before the marble and the money. A one-room house in Macon. Her father's laughter as he sanded a chair smooth. Her mother's tired hands pulling double shifts at the clinic. They had taught her that dignity wasn't in wealth. It was in standing firm when no one else did. And tonight, she had stood, even if no one believed her. Inside the mansion, Eleanor Duval struggled to sit upright in bed. Her cheeks still burned, not from the slap, but from the shame. "Adrian," she rasped as he finally entered. He hesitated in the doorway, guilt flickering across his features. "Mother, please. You need." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," she interrupted. "You sent away the only person who protected me." He froze. "She didn't. I saw her, Adrian." Eleanor's voice cracked. "She was shielding me. Savannah struck me, not her." His jaw clenched. "You must be mistaken." Eleanor's eyes filled. "Your father made the same mistake once, believing lies because they were easier than the truth." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. When Adrian left the room, he didn't look back. Downstairs, Savannah poured herself another glass of wine, smiling faintly at the sound of closing doors. Outside, Amara reached the end of the drive. The umbrella trembled in her hand. She turned once. The mansion's lights flickered through the rain like watchful eyes. Then she walked on, alone. The truth had been buried, but not forever. The rain followed Amara all the way to Atlanta. It softened to mist by the time she reached the diner on Peachtree Street, a narrow, two-story building with flickering neon that read Ida's Place. The woman behind the counter looked her up and down, soaked hair, worn shoes, suitcase clutched like armor. "You look like you need more than coffee," she said. "You need a roof." That was how Mrs. Ida Green became her landlady. The old woman had a voice like gravel and eyes kind enough to make the world hurt a little less. "Room upstairs," she said, handing Amara a brass key. "Small, but clean. Pay weekly. No men, no noise, and no pity." Amara managed a faint smile. "I can live with that." The room smelled faintly of grease and rain. The wallpaper peeled near the window, and the ceiling fan rattled like a tired heartbeat. Still, it was hers, a place to start over, or at least to stop falling. Every morning, she ironed her uniform and went to job interviews across the city. Every afternoon, she came back with polite rejections that curdled into silence. "Sorry, Miss Blake. Position's been filled. Your name came up in our records. Not a good fit for our clientele." Savannah's shadow reached farther than Amara imagined. Her name, once a quiet reference from grateful employers, was now a warning whispered in marble hallways. At night, she sat by the small window, watching the city lights blur through the drizzle. The sound of rain on the glass became its own kind of company. She replayed that morning over and over. The slap, the trembling of Mrs. Duval's hands, Savannah's laughter, Adrian's disbelief. She had thought courage would feel righteous. Instead, it felt like exile. Sometimes she wondered what Adrian was doing now, whether he had already forgotten, whether his conscience stirred when he saw the empty hallway where she used to stand with the morning tray. She hated herself for caring. Mrs. Ida noticed her quiet moods. She would tap on the door with two knuckles and slide in a plate of biscuits. "Eat, girl. You can't fight injustice on an empty stomach." One night, over burnt coffee, Ida said, "You keep looking out that window like you expect the truth to walk in. It won't. You gotta go find it." Amara met her eyes. "I told the truth, and they buried it." Ida snorted softly. "Honey, lies are quicksand. They swallow fast. But you stand long enough, the ground settles again." Something about that stayed with her. A week passed. The rain eased. Hope didn't. Amara began cleaning her small room, a habit from years of service. When she picked up her folded maid's uniform from the chair, something clinked softly on the floor. A tiny USB stick. Silver, unmarked. She frowned. She hadn't seen it before. Then a memory surfaced, dusting around the new cameras Adrian had installed near the study. Her pulse quickened. She sat on the edge of the bed, the USB resting in her palm like a secret. Could it be? For a long time, she simply stared at it. The rational part of her said it was nothing, a forgotten file, a security log. But somewhere deep down, a quiet voice whispered that fate wasn't finished with her yet. She reached for her old laptop. The hinges creaked when she opened it. Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant, as though echoing from another life. Amara inserted the USB. The screen flickered to life, pixels trembling. Her breath caught as the first frame appeared. The Duval study, polished and familiar, frozen in time. Savannah pacing. Eleanor sitting, pleading. And Amara, stepping forward. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling. The truth had been buried. But now, it had found a way back. The video began with a soft click, a whisper of static, then clarity. Amara leaned closer, her breath shallow. The screen glowed in the dim light of her rented room, casting pale reflections across the cracked wallpaper. There it was, the Duval study. Polished mahogany. The velvet drapes. The chandelier gleaming cold. And in the center of it all, Savannah Duval, pacing like a predator in heels. "Do you think you can control me, old woman?" Savannah's voice hissed through the laptop speakers. "I'm not your charity project." On the screen, Mrs. Eleanor Duval flinched but held her composure, the very image of wounded dignity. "Savannah, please, lower your voice." The slap came next. Sharp, echoing, real. Amara's hands shook. Her throat tightened. The footage didn't blur or distort. It caught everything. The rage twisting Savannah's face, Eleanor's pain, and Amara rushing in, stepping between them with trembling courage. "Don't you touch her again," the voice on the recording said, her own, trembling yet firm. Amara covered her mouth, tears burning behind her eyes. She hadn't realized how small she had looked in that room, how alone. But the truth was there, unedited, undeniable. For several minutes after the video ended, she sat frozen, the screen still flickering with the paused image, her own face caught mid-defense. Relief washed through her first, dizzying and fierce. Then came the rage, hot and sharp. Savannah had destroyed her name, stolen her dignity, and Adrian had believed every lie. Her eyes fell to the USB drive lying beside the laptop, gleaming faintly like a key to something dangerous. She could send it to every news outlet in Atlanta. She could ruin Savannah with a single email. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with the weight of temptation. Then she stopped. Mrs. Duval's face returned to her mind, gentle, kind, humiliated. The woman who had thanked her every morning, who had trusted her with the smallest tasks because she trusted her with the important ones too. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. Amara wiped her tears, exhaling slowly. "No," she whispered. "This isn't for me." She closed the laptop. The decision settled like a stone in her chest. Heavy, but right. If anyone deserved the truth, it was Eleanor Duval. Not the tabloids, not Adrian. Just her. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The city looked cleaner, sharper, as though the rain had washed away everything false. Amara sat at the small desk by her window with a sheet of lined paper and a pen. Her handwriting was steady, deliberate. "For Mrs. Duval, I only wanted to protect you. What happened that morning was never meant to bring shame, only safety. I'm sorry for the pain my presence caused your family. The enclosed footage will tell you what words never could. Amara Blake." When she finished, she folded the note carefully, slipped the USB inside an envelope, and sealed it shut. Her reflection in the window looked different, not broken anymore, just waiting. Downstairs, Mrs. Ida was pouring coffee. "Big day?" she asked, noticing the envelope clutched in Amara's hand. "Something like that," Amara said quietly. "I'm sending the truth where it belongs." Ida smiled, slow and knowing. "Good. Just make sure you're ready when it answers back." Amara gave a faint nod. I am. She stepped outside into the morning light, the letter pressed against her heart. In the distance, thunder rumbled once more, softer this time, like a promise rather than a threat. Inside that envelope was more than evidence. It was a reckoning. And somewhere, in a mansion of marble and secrets, guilt was about to wake. Adrien Duval hadn't slept in 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image, Amara standing in the doorway, rain-soaked, defiant, her eyes bright with disbelief as he handed her the dismissal papers. The memory gnawed at him. It wasn't guilt at first, more like static, the kind that fills silence when something isn't right. But it grew louder each hour, until even Savannah's laughter couldn't drown it out. He told himself he'd done the right thing, protected his mother, protected the family's name. But every time he passed the East Corridor, the faint echo of that morning seemed to linger in the air, like the house itself remembered. Eleanor Duval had barely spoken since Amara's departure. She took her tea alone now, her posture straight, her silence deliberate. Savannah chalked it up to embarrassment. She'll come around, she told Adrien breezily, twirling a gold bracelet around her wrist. She always does. Mother loves drama, but she loves her comfort more. Adrien didn't respond. He simply watched her, something cold beginning to settle behind his polite expression. Savannah had always been sharp, elegant, commanding. But lately, her charm carried an edge, cruel, almost gleeful. He noticed it first when she dismissed the new maid with a wave. She smells of bleach. Replace her. Or the way she laughed when Eleanor dropped a teacup, murmuring, age takes more than beauty, doesn't it? Tiny moments, fleeting and vicious. The kind of things Amara would have noticed. The kind of things he used to overlook. Late one evening, as lightning flickered over the gardens, Adrien entered his mother's suite. Eleanor sat by the window, her shawl drawn tight, her gaze fixed on the ring. Mother, he began quietly, are you feeling any better? She didn't answer right away. When she finally turned, her eyes were tired but fierce. Do you know what I regret most, Adrien? She asked softly. He frowned. What's that? Raising a son who believes a lie because it's easier than questioning his comfort. The words struck harder than any slap. Mother. She lifted a trembling hand, silencing him. You saw what you wanted to see. Savannah told you what you wanted to hear. And when that girl tried to protect me, you condemned her to save your peace. Adrien swallowed hard. You think I would have allowed her to? I don't think, Eleanor interrupted. I know, I was there. You weren't. Silence fell between them, thick with years of unspoken truths. Then, almost as an afterthought, she said, if you truly wish to know what happened, check the library camera. You insisted on installing them, remember? The words haunted him all night. He tried to dismiss them, but curiosity twisted into dread. Finally, long after midnight, Adrien descended the marble staircase and crossed into the library. The house was asleep. The only sound was the grandfather clock marking the seconds like a slow confession. He approached the control panel behind the oak cabinet, keyed in his access code, and scrolled through the archived footage. Tuesday morning. There it was. 10:47 a.m. He clicked play. The screen filled with movement. Savannah pacing, her tone sharp. Eleanor seated in the armchair. Adrien leaned forward, his breath shallow. Do you think you can control me, old woman? Savannah's voice spat through the speakers. His mother's reply was calm, pleading. Please, Savannah, you're upsetting yourself. The sound of the slap was unmistakable. Adrien's heart froze. He saw his mother's head jerk to the side, saw Savannah's hand still raised in fury, and then, from the edge of the frame, Amara appeared, stepping forward like a shield. Her voice trembled but held firm. Don't you touch her again. He'd never noticed before how small she was next to Savannah, how vulnerable, yet she stood her ground. The argument escalated, Savannah's venom, his mother's sobs, Amara's desperate calm. And then, the moment Savannah turned, just as the door opened and Adrien entered, the camera caught what he hadn't seen before. Eleanor's tearful nod toward Amara, not accusation, but gratitude. And he had misread it all. He had believed Savannah's trembling story, the crocodile tears, the fabricated injury, the whispered plea. Asterisk. She struck me, Adrian. You must send her away. Asterisk. He had signed the dismissal letter without question, without courage. Now, the truth stared back at him in grainy clarity. Adrian replayed the footage once. Then again. Then again. Each time, the words rang louder. Don't you touch her again. By the fifth replay, he was gripping the edge of the desk, shaking. He remembered her standing in the rain that night, the steadiness in her voice when she'd said, asterisk, I'd do it again. Asterisk. He thought she was being defiant. She had been telling the truth. A sound broke from his chest, low, cracked, something between a laugh and a sob. He sank into the chair, pressing his palms to his face. The chandelier's reflection flickered across the polished floor, and in that distorted light, Adrien Duval saw himself clearly for the first time. The heir who prided himself on honor had condemned an innocent woman to exile, all because he couldn't bear to believe evil lived in his own house. When the sun rose, the mansion felt different. Smaller, colder. Savannah breezed into the breakfast room, radiant in silk. You're up early, she said, pouring coffee as though nothing had shifted. Adrien didn't answer. He watched her carefully, every graceful gesture now a performance he finally saw through. She noticed his stare and smiled. Something wrong, darling? He set down his cup with deliberate calm. Nothing a truth can't fix. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Later, alone in his study, Adrien replayed the video one last time. He didn't need to. Every second of it had already branded itself into his mind. But he watched anyway, because the voice, her voice, steadied him. Don't you touch her again. Courage in a single sentence. Integrity he had lacked. As the screen dimmed, he whispered to the empty room, his voice rough and certain. I fired the wrong person. And for the first time since that night, the static inside him went silent, replaced by something heavier, but cleaner. The kind of silence that only comes after truth finally finds its way home. Adrien didn't remember the drive into Atlanta. Only the blur of traffic lights cutting through fog, the rhythmic hum of the tires, and the endless loop of Amara's voice replaying in his head. Firm, unbroken, mercifully human. He had spent 3 days calling old contacts, searching staff rosters, visiting every agency that might have taken her in. Each inquiry led nowhere. Savannah's influence had been thorough. Amara's name was marked, erased, replaced by silence. But guilt has its own kind of compass. On the 4th day, a lead came from an old chauffeur who remembered overhearing a rumor. She's downtown somewhere, working near Peachtree. Adrien followed it until he found the flickering neon sign of Ida's place. The diner was small, tucked between a pawnshop and a laundromat. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, rain, and something faintly burnt. Behind the counter, wiping down a table, was Amara. For a moment, he didn't move. She looked different, tired, yes, but steady. The kind of steadiness forged by surviving what should have broken you. When she turned and saw him, the cloth froze in her hand. Mr. Duval. Her voice was cool, almost polite. Amara, he said, his throat tightening around her name. I don't. She cut in, setting the cloth down. Not here. Mrs. Ida, sensing the tension, gave him a pointed look. Back booth, she said dryly. If you're here to make a mess, clean it up after. They sat across from each other in the corner booth, the hum of the diner filling the silence. Adrien's tailored coat looked absurd against the cracked vinyl seat. Amara's hands stayed folded on the table, her posture calm but wary. I came to apologize, he said finally. Her eyes didn't soften. Apologies don't erase humiliation. I know, he said quietly, but I had to say it anyway. Why now? Because I saw the truth. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table, the same one she had once mailed to his mother. I found the footage, he said. Everything. The slap. The way you protected her. The way his voice broke, but he steadied it. The way I failed you. Amara stared at the drive for a long time. Then she looked up, her gaze sharp. So now you believe me. I should have believed you then. That would have taken courage, she said softly. Something you didn't have. He didn't argue. You deserve to hold your own truth, he said instead, nudging the drive toward her. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she drew the small device toward herself and closed her fingers around it. You think this fixes anything? No, he said. It just returns what was always yours. She studied him, her expression unreadable. If you want forgiveness, you're asking the wrong person. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, she said, standing. Because what you did can't be undone. He looked up at her, voice low. Then what should I do? Amara paused, her silhouette framed by the gray light filtering through the diner window. Apologize to your mother, she said. She's the one who suffered most. Start there. That evening, Adrian drove back to the Duval estate. The mansion loomed ahead, as pristine and cold as ever, but the air around it felt heavier, as though the house itself was waiting. He found Eleanor in the garden, sitting beneath the magnolia tree that had survived 3 generations of storms. The petals had begun to fall, white against the damp earth. When he knelt beside her, she didn't look surprised, only sad. Mother, he began, voice thick. You were right. I usually am, she murmured, but her eyes softened. I saw it, the footage. I saw what Savannah did to you. What Amara tried to stop. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she set her teacup down. And I fired her. I let you be humiliated while I defended your abuser. The words scraped out of him like broken glass. I don't know how to make that right. She reached out, her thin fingers resting over his. You can't fix the past, Adrian, but you can serve the truth. Tears filled his eyes, the kind he hadn't shed since childhood. She told me to apologize to you. Then do it properly, Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm. He bowed his head. I'm sorry, Mother, for not listening, for doubting you, for being too blind to see the woman you raised me to recognize. Eleanor smiled faintly. You're not blind anymore. Inside the house, Savannah's perfume still lingered in the halls, cloying and sweet. But to Adrian, it smelled like decay now, the scent of deception masked in luxury. He knew what he had to do. Truth, he realized, wasn't just about knowing. It was about choosing what to do once you did. He walked into his father's old office, the one Savannah had claimed as her own. The walls were lined with photos of charity galas and board meetings, images built on illusion. Adrian stared at them one by one before picking up his phone. Martin, he said to his family's attorney, his tone steady. I want to schedule a press statement. Tomorrow. I'll be addressing the incident at the Duval estate, personally. There was silence on the other end. Sir, that could damage the family's reputation. It's already damaged, Adrian said. Now it's time to clean it. He hung up, the decision firm in his chest. That night, as Rain returned to Atlanta, Amara sat by her window at Ida's place. The diner had gone quiet. The city lights reflected in the puddles below like small, trembling stars. She turned the flash drive over in her hands, wondering if he had truly changed, or if guilt was just another mask the wealthy wore. Still, something inside her had shifted when he'd said, "You deserve to hold your own truth." For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. Not free yet, but close. At the same hour, miles away, Adrian stood on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The rain soaked through his shirt, cold against his skin, cleansing. Eleanor appeared behind him, wrapped in a shawl. "You're really going to do it," she said. "Yes," he answered. "Publicly. You'll lose friends, investors, maybe even her. I already lost something far more important." Eleanor smiled faintly. Then perhaps redemption begins there. He looked at her, the woman whose integrity had outlasted an empire of lies, and nodded. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "the world will know the truth." Lightning flashed across the sky, casting the mansion in brief, brilliant light. For the first time, it didn't look like a fortress. It looked like what it truly was, a house ready to be stripped clean. And beneath that storm, Adrian Duval finally felt what Amara must have felt standing in the rain that night, the quiet, aching power of doing the right thing, no matter the cost. The marble steps of the Duval headquarters gleamed beneath a clouded morning sky. Dozens of cameras lined the plaza, their lenses hungry for spectacle. Reporters murmured, microphones poised, as the billionaire heir prepared to step into the light, not as a savior, but as a man ready to confess. Inside, Adrian Duval adjusted his cufflinks with trembling hands. He had faced shareholders, boardrooms, even lawsuits, but never the judgment of his own conscience under the glare of the world. Behind him, Eleanor sat in her wheelchair, her silver hair swept neatly back, her eyes calm but resolute. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "I just hope it's not too late," Adrian murmured. "It's never too late to stand for truth," she replied. "But you only get to do it once, so make it count." The crowd quieted when Adrian stepped up to the podium. Flashbulbs burst, 1,000 eyes fixing on him and the woman beside him. The family crest shimmered faintly behind them, a symbol that suddenly felt heavier than any empire. "Good morning," Adrian began, voice steady but low. "For generations, the Duval name has stood for wealth, influence, and legacy. But legacies mean nothing when built on lies." A ripple moved through the reporters. He inhaled, looked briefly at his mother, then continued. "2 weeks ago, an incident occurred inside our home, one that has since been distorted, buried, and silenced. My stepsister, Savannah Duval, struck my mother during an argument over her inheritance. When our household staff member, Ms. Amara Blake, intervened to protect her, Savannah twisted the truth. I believed her." Gasps broke across the plaza. Cameras zoomed in, pens scratched. "I fired Ms. Blake that day," Adrian said, his voice tightening. "I humiliated her. I let deceit replace decency, because it was easier to trust privilege than courage." Eleanor's eyes shimmered with quiet pride as her son paused, letting the silence settle. "But the truth," he said finally, "was captured on camera." A large monitor flickered to life behind him, showing a single frame. Savannah standing over Eleanor, her hand mid-swing, Amara stepping between them. The image froze there, a testament, unarguable and raw. Murmurs surged. Questions flew. But Adrian held up his hand. "Today, I want to set the record straight. Ms. Blake risked her job and her safety to defend my mother. She showed the kind of integrity that this family forgot." He turned slightly, gesturing to the small seating area at the side of the stage, where Amara sat, stunned, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't expected this. The letter inviting her had been vague, just a family announcement. Now she found herself in front of a nation, her name spoken with reverence instead of suspicion. Adrian's voice softened. "Miss Blake, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you acknowledgement. You stood where I should have stood. You did right, when I did nothing." Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned to her. Amara's throat tightened, her pulse pounding. She wanted to disappear and stand tall all at once. As the conference ended, Adrian stepped away from the microphones and approached her. The crowd buzzed, flashes still bursting around them. He extended a small folder. "The Eleanor Trust," he said, "a foundation to support domestic workers and caregivers, those who are too often silenced. I want you to lead it, to give voice to those like you who stand unseen." The offer hung between them, glittering, sincere, impossible. Amara looked at the folder, then up at him. "That's generous," she said quietly, "but unnecessary." Adrian blinked. "You deserve this." "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "I deserve peace. And peace doesn't come from trading one mansion for another." Eleanor had wheeled closer, her expression warm, knowing. Amara continued, voice calm but strong enough to carry beyond the cameras. "You can't fix injustice by replacing it with guilt, Mr. Duval. Do right, don't do favors." For a moment, the crowd went silent again. Her words cut through the spectacle, grounding it in something purer than reputation. Adrian lowered his gaze. "You're right," he said softly. "Then help me do it right." "I already did," she said. "The day I told the truth." When the reporters began shouting questions, "Will you press charges against your sister? Will Ms. Blake be reinstated? How will this affect the company?" Adrian answered calmly. "My stepsister will face the consequences of her actions, as anyone should. But today isn't about punishment. It's about truth." Across the plaza, Savannah stood in the shadows near a pillar, sunglasses failing to hide her fury. Every word tightened the noose around her public image. By afternoon, headlines would read, Duval heiress exposed for abuse and lies. Her name would trend for all the wrong reasons. She turned sharply and stalked away, her empire of manipulation collapsing with each step. Hours later, the plaza had emptied, leaving only the soft hum of cleanup crews and fading echoes of applause. Amara stood near the fountain, her reflection rippling beside Eleanor's. You were brave today, Eleanor said quietly. So were you, Amara replied. You raised a son who could face himself. Eleanor smiled faintly. That took time, and the right teacher. Amara's lips curved, humble but touched. If I taught him anything, it's that truth doesn't belong to anyone. It just needs someone willing to carry it. Eleanor reached for her hand. And you carried it well. Adrian approached then, his coat draped over one arm, his expression unreadable but softer than before. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for listening, Amara replied. He hesitated. Will you ever forgive me? She gave a small, sad smile. Forgiveness isn't mine to give. Redemption is something you build. Then she turned, sunlight breaking through the clouds as she stepped away. Later that evening, the city buzzed with the aftermath, news anchors dissecting every word, social media ablaze with praise for the maid who spoke truth to power. At Ida's place, Mrs. Ida poured Amara a cup of coffee and set it down with a proud grin. Look at you, girl, stirring up change without even trying. Amara chuckled softly. Didn't stir it. Just stop pretending it wasn't boiling. Ida nodded approvingly. That's how revolutions start. Outside, the last light of day gilded the diner windows, catching in Amara's eyes as she looked out over the street. She had lost everything once, her job, her dignity, her name. But standing there now, she realized she'd kept what mattered most. Her truth, and the power to walk away with her head high, knowing she didn't need a foundation, a title, or a fortune to prove her worth. Because she had already built something far greater, a legacy of courage wrapped in grace. The world didn't forgive Savannah Duval quietly. Within days of Adrian's confession, news outlets feasted on the scandal. Heiress exposed. The Duval family scandal blared across every feed. Savannah vanished from public view, but not for long. Cornered people rarely surrender, they strike. From a penthouse in Manhattan, she launched her counterattack. A smear campaign crafted from doctored images, twisted testimonies, and hired voices. Edited footage surfaced online, painting Amara as manipulative, Eleanor as senile, and Adrian as a man too guilt-ridden to tell the truth from fantasy. For 48 hours, chaos ruled again. Comment sections filled with venom. Hashtags flipped from sympathy to suspicion. Adrian's PR team panicked. Sir, if we stay silent, the narrative turns, one advisor warned. This could destroy everything you rebuilt. Adrian stood in his office, hands braced against the glass overlooking Atlanta's skyline. His reflection stared back, tired but unshaken. Then we don't stay silent, he said. He turned to his media director. Release the full footage. Every second. No edits. No commentary. Just the truth. Sir, once it's out, there's no taking it back. That's the point. Within an hour, the uncut video streamed on every platform. It ran for 13 minutes, unpolished, grainy, irrefutable. The slap. The trembling voice of Eleanor pleading. Amara stepping forward. Savannah's venomous words echoing through marble halls. The truth didn't need a caption. It spoke in the language of reality, unfiltered and unforgiving. By nightfall, public opinion shifted again, swift and merciless. Hashtags reclaimed Amara's name with reverence. Commentators who'd mocked her now called her a symbol of quiet strength. Savannah's lies disintegrated under the glare of evidence. And for the first time in her life, Savannah Duval couldn't buy her way out. Lawsuits followed, from charities defrauded, from staff silenced by threats, from investors who discovered falsified records. Her social circle evaporated overnight. The invitations stopped. The whispers started. The empire she had schemed to control crumbled, brick by gilded brick. Back at the Duval estate, peace returned slowly, like sunlight after a storm. Eleanor's health improved. She spent her afternoons in the garden again, tending to her magnolias. Adrian often joined her, no longer as the heir overseeing property, but as a son relearning patience. They spoke of small things now, tea blends, books, the scent of rain, but beneath every conversation flowed gratitude, deep and wordless. One afternoon, Eleanor looked up from pruning a branch and said, "Your father built this house with ambition. You're rebuilding it with truth. That's the foundation that lasts." Adrian smiled faintly. "Truth seems fragile sometimes. Only when people run from it," she said. "You stopped running." Weeks later, in the newly renovated East Wing, the Eleanor Trust took form. Its offices were bright, modern, and filled with people whose lives had once been defined by quiet labor. Caregivers, nurses, housekeepers, women who had been invisible until someone like Amara showed them what dignity looked like. Adrian made sure every meeting began the same way, by replaying the first 10 seconds of that footage, the moment Amara stepped forward. It wasn't spectacle, it was reminder. Still, something felt incomplete. "Invite her," Eleanor said one morning, watching her son linger by the fountain. "You can't build this without the woman who inspired it." "She won't come," Adrian said. "She's moved on." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Then let her decide that herself." When the letter reached Amara's small apartment above Ida's place, she almost didn't open it. The envelope bore the Duval crest, a symbol of pain she'd worked hard to leave behind. Inside, the message was brief, handwritten in Adrian's familiar script. "Amara, * the Eleanor Trust is open. I would be honored if you'd join us as a consultant, not as an employee, but as a voice that keeps us honest. *. There's no debt to repay. Only good work left to do. *. Adrian." Amara read it twice, then set it on the table beside her cup of coffee. Mrs. Ida leaned over her shoulder, squinting. "That from the fancy one again?" Amara nodded. "He wants me to help with the foundation." "And you?" She hesitated. "I told myself I was done with that world." Ida poured her more coffee. "Sometimes, healing ain't about walking away. Sometimes, it's about going back, with armor this time." Amara smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." Ida chuckled. "Baby, if it was easy, rich folks would have done it long ago." Days passed before Amara made her choice. When she finally returned to the Duval estate, it wasn't as a maid, but as herself. The guards recognized her and opened the gates without question. The gardens smelled the same, though the air felt lighter now. Adrian was waiting by the fountain where she'd once been dismissed. His expression was calm, almost hopeful. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I would have understood." They walked through the hallways, now filled with quiet activity, volunteers sorting donation boxes, designers planning community housing projects. Every corner of the mansion that had once echoed with vanity now hummed with purpose. Adrian stopped beside a newly mounted plaque that read, "The Eleanor Trust, for those who serve with grace and those who see them." He looked at her. "This is what you built." "I just gave it walls." Amara traced the engraved words with her fingers. "Walls don't make truth. People do." He nodded. "Then help us keep it alive." "Not for me, for them." She studied him for a long time, searching for traces of the man who had once fired her. She saw remorse, but also renewal, the kind that couldn't be faked. Finally, she said, "Maybe healing isn't about leaving. Maybe it's about returning stronger." Eleanor appeared then, elegant as ever, her smile radiant. "Welcome home, dear." Amara returned the smile, gentle, steady, unafraid. That evening, as dusk fell over the estate, the three of them stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. The air was warm, the magnolias in bloom. Savannah's name was now a footnote in scandal columns, her influence gone. The Duval legacy had been rewritten, not by wealth or power, but by truth finally given a voice. Adrian turned to Amara. "You were right that day. Courage and grace win in the end." Amara's eyes met his. They only win when someone listens. And as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet, the mansion, once a palace of silence, glowed with a new kind of light. It was no longer the house of lies. It was the house where truth had learned to breathe. The Duval mansion had never felt so alive. Once a monument to pride and secrecy, it now pulsed with laughter, music, and the gentle hum of genuine gratitude. Crystal chandeliers glittered above a sea of guests, not the usual aristocrats or investors, but nurses, caregivers, and domestic workers whose hands bore the quiet marks of service. The launch of the Eleanor Trust had drawn people from across Georgia, not for prestige, but for purpose. Banners hung along the grand staircase, each one carrying a simple creed: grace is the measure of greatness. Amara stood near the entrance, her dress simple, her posture composed. For the first time, she entered the mansion not as staff, but as a guest of honor. The marble beneath her shoes no longer whispered of servitude. It welcomed her with respect hard-won and deserved. Eleanor, radiant in silver, greeted guests beside her son. Every so often, her gaze found Amara, and she smiled, a quiet acknowledgement between two women bound by truth. Adrian moved through the crowd with ease now, his demeanor humble yet sure. He shook hands with volunteers, introduced caregivers to board members, and made certain no one felt unseen. When his eyes found Amara's across the room, something unspoken passed between them: gratitude, reverence, and the faintest trace of awe. The evening's program began in the ballroom. Rows of chairs faced a small stage framed by magnolia branches and white roses, Eleanor's touch. Adrian spoke first, briefly recounting the vision behind the foundation. "We're here," he said, "to honor those who serve with grace, to give them the voice and dignity they've too long been denied. The Eleanor Trust exists because one act of courage changed everything." He paused, looking toward Amara. It began with a woman who refused to stay silent. The applause that followed was warm, rising like a tide. Amara felt her heart stutter, her fingers tightening around the edges of her notes. She hadn't planned to speak, but Eleanor had insisted. "You were the spark," she'd said earlier. "Let them see the flame." When Adrian stepped aside and gestured for her to take the stage, Amara hesitated only a moment before walking forward. The microphone caught her breath as she began. "When I first worked in this house," she said softly, "I used to think silence was safety, that if I stayed quiet, did my job, and followed every rule, I'd be invisible, and invisibility meant protection." Her voice strengthened. "But silence is its own kind of prison. It keeps the truth locked away, and the soul with it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I learned something the hard way," she continued. "Truth doesn't make you rich, it makes you free. And freedom, that's a wealth no one can take from you." She glanced toward Eleanor and smiled. "This house taught me that even the strongest walls can crumble under lies. But it also taught me that people, no matter their station, can rebuild those walls with honesty, compassion, and grace." Eleanor's eyes glistened. Adrian stood behind her, shoulders squared but eyes soft, pride tempered by humility. Amara closed her speech with a quiet promise. "The Eleanor Trust isn't about charity. It's about justice, the kind that listens, believes, and restores dignity. I'm honored to have seen that kind of courage here tonight. Not mine, but yours." When she stepped back, the applause was thunderous. Eleanor reached out a trembling hand, and Amara took it. Their fingers clasped, two generations of strength, different worlds united by one truth. For a moment, all the noise faded, leaving only the pulse of something sacred, redemption, alive and breathing. Later, after the speeches and toasts, after the guests had begun to drift toward the gardens, Amara found a quiet corner near the old grand staircase. It was there, years ago, she had once stood trembling, suitcase in hand, dismissed under false accusation. Now, laughter echoed where judgment once lingered. Eleanor joined her, moving carefully with her cane. "You spoke beautifully," she said. "You reminded them what this was truly about." Amara smiled gently. "I only said what needed saying." "That's what makes it powerful," Eleanor replied. She took Amara's hand again. "You gave me back my son. And yourself." Amara's throat tightened. "You gave me the chance to believe good people still exist." Eleanor's eyes glowed with affection. My dear, you prove they do. They stood together for a moment, watching the crowd mingle. Beyond the ballroom doors, the scent of magnolia drifted through open windows. Will you stay on? Eleanor asked softly. The trust could use your guidance. Amara hesitated, glancing toward the balcony where Adrian spoke with volunteers. I haven't decided yet. Maybe my work here is done. Eleanor's smile was wistful. Healing never ends, Amara. It just changes shape. When the evening finally waned and the last guest departed, Amara slipped outside for air. The night was cool, soft rain misting over the driveway, just like the night she'd left this place, heartbroken and alone. But now the air smelled of rebirth, not ruin. Her car waited at the gate, headlights glowing faintly in the drizzle. She adjusted her shawl, preparing to leave quietly, without fanfare. Footsteps approached from behind. Leaving already? Adrian's voice was low, tentative. She turned. He stood beneath the awning, raindrops beating on his hair, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned. In his hand, he held a small envelope. I didn't want to make a scene, she said. You've earned every scene in this house, he replied with a faint smile. They stood there, silence stretching comfortably between them. The rain softened to a whisper. I wanted to give you this, Adrian said, holding out the envelope. She took it carefully. Inside was a photograph, a still frame from the security footage. Eleanor seated, Savannah mid-motion, Amara stepping forward. Beneath it, in elegant handwriting, were the words, The day truth stood tall. Amara looked up, emotion flickering across her face. You kept it. I keep it in my office, Adrian said. A reminder of what integrity looks like. Her eyes softened. You've changed, Adrian. He gave a quiet laugh. You taught me that wealth means nothing without integrity. Amara's smile was small but genuine. Then you'll be the richest man alive. They stood there a moment longer, the sound of rain mingling with the faint hum of the city beyond the gates. For a fleeting second, the world felt suspended, past and present balanced delicately in the air. Adrian glanced at the photograph again. You know, he said, the world will always remember the scandal. Amara nodded. And you? He met her gaze. I'll remember the woman who stood for truth when no one else did. Something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not regret, but a kind of peace that only comes after surviving the storm. Amara tucked the envelope into her bag and stepped toward the car. The gate creaked open slowly. As she walked away, the clouds parted. A beam of sunlight broke through, slicing across the wet pavement. The same rain-washed path she had once taken in shame, now gleaming with redemption. Adrian watched until her figure disappeared down the drive, framed by the rising light. Behind him, the mansion glowed, not cold and distant as it once had, but warm, alive, filled with the hum of renewal. Inside, Eleanor watched from the window, her heart both heavy and full. She whispered a silent prayer of thanks, for grace, for courage, for the woman who had reminded them all that truth, though costly, was the only inheritance worth keeping. Later that night, as rain faded into stillness, Amara sat in her apartment, the photograph propped against a vase of magnolias. The city outside glittered, not the kind of glitter that blinds, but the kind that shines after being washed clean. She thought of Savannah, her ambition turned to ashes, her empire gone. Of Adrian, learning, rebuilding. Of Eleanor, thriving in peace. And then, she thought of herself. Not the maid, not the martyr, not even the hero. Just a woman who chose truth and found freedom waiting on the other side. She whispered to herself, the same words that had carried her through every storm. I'd do it again. And outside, as dawn broke across Atlanta, the sunlight fell through her window in soft golden stripes. The final proof that even after the darkest reckoning, grace always returns with the morning.
Thank you for staying till the end of the story. Please do well to subscribe to my channel so as to receive more exciting stories. Love ya!